Let me put us in the spotlight. There we go. So today we're going to be talking about seller nets and buyer costs. You know, technically it's not a buyer net sheet because the buyer doesn't net the buyer costs. It's a buyer cost analysis and a seller net. And what you are going to need to do, let's start with working with the seller. You should be able to come up with a rudimentary, at least, net sheet for a seller using software that Brandon is going to give you access to at no additional charge, right? At least to start with. And so when you're talking to a seller, the seller is going to be interested in how much cash are they going to walk away with when the property sells. Now, in order to do that, there's a couple of pieces of information you need in advance. First of all, you're going to need to have some idea what the property is likely to sell for, right? Now you can have more than one number. So you can say, well, this will net that, and this will net that, and this will net that. That's a cue for Brandon that we're going to have to talk about that part, right? Which is sort of covered under the multiple offer calculator. There's what? How many calculators are there in Palm Agent? A lot, more than 25, something like that. There's a whole bunch of them. You're going to have an idea of what the property is likely to sell for or a price range. Now, if you're good at this, what you would also learn to use is the Palm One Agent or the Palm Agent mobile app. And so what I would do on the listing appointment is in advance, I would log into the website, which is Chicago Agent One, and I would start putting in numbers and things like that to start filling it out, the address, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because personally, I don't like doing it in front of people with my, big sausage fingers on the little screen on my phone. And then when you're there, you can make adjustments. So that if they said, well, if we sold it for this, what would it be? If we sold it for that, what it would be? You can already in advance put in the information about the client, that sort of thing, right? That would be a good thing to do. So you need to know roughly what the property is likely to sell for. You're going to need to have an estimate as to what their existing loan amount is. You need to know that. How would you know that? Ask them before you go. Do you have an idea of how much your outstanding loan balance is? Right? Ask them.
And the other thing is if you have the property address, it will automatically pull this information based on county records, what they have. So put the address in first and see what it comes up with. It's an estimate. It might not be exact, but it's going to put you really close to what.
But it's looking at the original loan amount and making assumptions about amortization.
Exactly.
And if I went bi-weekly in terms of my mortgage payments, then my outstanding balance would be less. And if I haven't made a payment in 3 months because I lost my job, my loan balance is going to be more. But yeah, that if you can't find out, this isn't bad. But I always like to ask because sometimes they'll say, well, we haven't made a payment in a couple of months. Okay. Yes. Right. So now it's anyhow, thank you though for the other thing is what interest rate. Now we can kind of sort of guess, right? When the note was originally recorded, the note actually isn't recorded, but that was a technical mistake on my part. When the trust deed is recorded, it doesn't put down the interest rate. In other words, in the tax data, it doesn't say what the interest rate was. So typically we guess by saying, well, they closed in, 10 years ago, October, and interest rates for fixed rate loans were this, right? But then I always like to ask. And the reason that's important is because depending upon what day of the month the transaction closes, there's going to be prorated interest. And if they're closing at the end of the month, there's almost 1 full month's worth of interest, which could be thousands of dollars. and you don't want to be off by thousands of dollars. Then the other thing, and this may be a little bit different, Brandon, is that this is as a result of the NAR settlement, but one of the conversations that we would have on a listing appointment is the seller's willingness and ability to offer concessions to the buyer. And what sometimes the seller says, because all the seller is seeing at this point is a seller net sheet. So the seller is thinking, well, I'm the only one that has any expenses. And why should I pay? I got all these expenses. Why should I pay one of the buyers? So I believe the best practice would be on a listing appointment. In addition to producing a seller net, we produce a buyer cost analysis on the same property using what would be a normal loan, usually 80-20, could be something different depending on the value of the property. So we can actually show the seller, look at all the money the buyer is going to also have to spend, right? It's not just you. All right. That's my lead up. So do you have like a sample address that you like to use? Should we ask the group if they've got an address?
Yeah, we could do either one. Yeah, if anybody has an address they'd like to provide, I'll use that.
It could be an existing listing.
I have a house that I've been working on for a potential buyer. It's 450 Bottle Hill Road, and that's in Georgetown, California.
Wow. I didn't even
It was
know.
450. Give me that name again.
Bottle Hill Road.
Bottle Hill?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, here in Georgetown, California, right? Okay.
You can share screen.
Yeah. So let's go to my screen here. Okay, it's trying to gather that information. So that's why I was saying the address is important. It's going to try to fill out these line items as much as possible without any effort on your part. It is best to ask the sellers who what their loan balance is, what their interest rate is. But if you want to bring something to the table without having to bother your clients, then this would be the way to do it. You can always ask that stuff to get the information right, during that listing appointment if they want to correct you. But it does make you look like a true professional bringing in knowing this information without having to pick their brain. But you do want to be right. So I would you feel out the situation and kind of just treat it how you think it should go. So
what county is this in?
Yes,
I happen to know where Bianca is, so I have an advantage over you.
Let's see. So Georgetown, California. I actually have not heard of Georgetown, California. So right now it's preset for Santa Clara County. So is that outside?
No, it is. I'm sorry, I don't even know what county.
I think
it's Placer County.
Placer? Okay.
Placer, yes.
Okay, so let me get rid of that. We go up here to change the area. It's always gonna preset it for Santa Clara County, Northern California. So Placer County. There you go. Done. So yes, you always want to reset the estimate because it's gonna pick all the fees and costs from that county.
all right.
There we go. So it switched. Just taking a little longer. Okay. Let's see. So it's already there. 450 Bottle Hill Road. Select that again. Oh, it's gonna go. There we go. Okay, so it's automatically gonna pull that estimated annual property tax.
Let me just make a comment about this. So first of all, I would always ask when I'm going on a listing appointment if they know what the outstanding loan balance is and what their interest rate is. I'm just throwing that out. Sometimes they say, I don't know, don't push it. Secondly, if you're wondering, why is it asking like the taxes? Is that current taxes or is it future taxes? Now, if it's a buyer, it's still going to ask about property taxes. And the reason, even though there's going to be a reassessment, the buyer is going to have to oftentimes perhaps either pay a prorated amount of the seller's taxes or receive a credit for a prorated amount of the seller's taxes. So one of the line items is a tax proration, which is why this number is going in. And it may be something you have to explain because they're like, why are you charging me for property taxes? But it all depends on where their taxes were paid to. You remember that principles, right?
Mike and Brandon, this is JD. I misspoke. It's actually El Dorado County, not Placid.
Uh-oh.
It's close to the county line. I messed up.
All right.
Good. I didn't know either. So El Dorado.
El Dorado. All right. So this was done on purpose to demonstrate the
Exactly.
need of determining exactly where the property is, because counties have different rules as to who pays what. And different cities and counties may have, but mostly cities, different transfer taxes. All right.
Okay. So let's put in that address again. Okay. So we got the taxes, got interest rate, and if you read below here, they give you an average rate of when it was recorded, 6.94. You know, you need to talk to the sellers to confirm what it is. It's probably not exactly that, but this will put you close again. So, you know, I usually do, you know, if I'm providing this and I don't know, I'm going to give you the average. So 6.94.
And we're assuming they don't have an adjustable.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So estimated loan balance.
Yes. So it is just very much. So not much owed on this home. It's going to get you do want to confirm that this is correct. But I mean that puts you in the ballpark. That's got to be close if it's that low of a number. So let's use that estimate.
Yeah. That's a really low loan amount.
It is. Yeah, I usually don't see that.
It looks more like my credit card bill.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, you do have the loan types here if you need to switch it, but it defaults to conventional. Sales price, next important thing. So
Do
let's
you have an idea?
JD or
It's beyond.
Bianca, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Alright.
This isn't for my listing. I'm sorry. This is for a buyer that's interested in this property. So this address has been on my mind.
All right,
Okay.
but that's okay. To come up with a number, we could simply go to RPR.
Oh,
And,
I'm sorry. It's 460,000.
okay, so 460. This is just for educational purposes.
Mhm.
Now, broker fee. I don't know when Palm Agent is planning to upgrade their software, but the broker fee of 6% is assuming that the buyer and the listing side are rolled into one, which is, so Lewis is asking if we have access to this program if we are in Chicago or Fidelity. The answer is yes. If you send me $5, Lewis, I'll put in my Venmo number later. We'll get you no additional charge access. But the answer is yes. Chicago Title has this. Fidelity owns Chicago Title. And so whatever one has, the other has.
This program is free to access anywhere in the US.
Right.
You pick your county. I'd recommend picking your county, not my county and selecting me. I would, if you have a rep over there, I would select that county and select your rep.
There are other reasons for doing that because there's some local marketing materials that are done by county as opposed to, but if you're in Santa Clara County, pick Brandon, or San Benito, right? Pick Brandon. If you're not Chicago, Fidelity, they're all part of the same family. And the reality is virtually every major title and escrow company in the world has a version of Palm Agent, which is software. I can't think of one that doesn't. But anyhow,
Yeah.
so for broker fee, if we're doing a seller net, at this point, we're going to be putting in what the seller, there we go. And so the listing fee varies by area. We could say 3, buyer's fee, we could leave it that way. And then notice where it says show split on closing, I would keep that so that you can distinguish between the two. Now, does everybody understand that we want to start with a net that identifies the likelihood that they're going to be paying a concession? So the two options are we could either here put in 3% for the buyer broker fee or leave it out. And then later, when we get to another field, we can put in a general concession to the buyer and put in 3%. I'm thinking that if I were doing it, I would get rid of that buyer's broker fee here. I would back that out. I would say 3%. And then for right now, we'll just do that. And then later, when we get to other costs, we're going to add that in, a concession. So
Yes.
where would that be?
So this might not be the right calculator here because we're on the seller net sheet, but would you be able to put it in the miscellaneous here?
Sure.
And then you would.
So write in for item name, buyer concession. And then for a percentage, put in, let's say 2.5. And then done. All right.
Done, or you can add another field if you want
Well,
to.
at this point, we may. So what would be some other field? Come on, experienced agents or inexperienced agents.
I did look this up before.
So is it possible that the seller is going to pay for a home warranty? The answer is yes.
Yes.
Right. So we would put that in. How would we know how much to put in? Well, it's good to talk to Fidelity National Home Warranty, which Chicgo Title doesn't have their own home warranty, but Fidelity, I've mentioned their friends. Does the and we might need to do a longer version of this, but what are some of the things that a seller pays for? Maybe a concession to a buyer, a home warranty. There's a natural hazard disclosure statement, NHD.
Home associate, yeah.
There might be HOA.
Yeah, HOA, loan origination fees, title search fees.
A loan origination fee is probably not a seller cost.
Okay.
And title search is probably built into the title insurance.
Okay. What about appraisals?
Appraisal is a buyer cost.
Okay.
I'm having fun. Keep going. Give me
the internet is not helping me out.
So let me go through the list. It would be a good idea to say to the seller that you ought to get a termite inspection, a property inspection, and other inspections. If there's a pool inspection, you ought to do that before you put your house on the market, because we don't want to be renegotiating the price once the buyer has them. Now, in order to do that, you're going to need to know what would a termite, a property, a roof inspection, a pool inspection, what would that cost? Which would mean this is another number you would want to know. You could Google it. You could look for local, because the prices vary, I've noticed. Some of my agents in Kings County, it's much higher than it is in Santa Clara County. But if we're going to go through the list, and I'll put together a list for you. By the way, Ra, our transaction coordinator, knows the list. So, by the way, with Melissa. because we've seen a lot of them, right? But there's a home warranty, there are inspections, property termite usually at least. What other one did an NHD that a seller would pay for. If it's in a homeowner association, the seller's going to have to pay usually the homeowner association document request fee, and is also going to have to pay a fee for the transfer in the HOA. Now, one of the things you could do if you've got a lead up to your listing appointment and you know the address of the property, you could communicate with Chicgo Title or whoever your local rep is, because the escrow officers know what these fees typically are in every county, because they look at them all day long. But that's sort of the group. You have termite, property, other inspections, NHD. I will provide a list, by the way. Home warranty, and then there's at least 2 HOA fees. Right, a upfront fee to get the documents and a transfer fee. Now, this software already knows county transfer taxes and knows city transfer taxes. But now these numbers are subject to change. Let's say the property has solar panels. You'll notice in you want us to help you with the listing, our form asks, are there solar panels? If you looked at my YouTube, you'll see I did a class with Melissa and a lender and a solar panel salesperson about, shining light on solar panels, something like that. But there's oftentimes, if the solar panels are leased or if they're liened, there's a transfer fee that may be required to pay off. There's oftentimes fees involved in the solar panels. And Mr. Pine was suggesting escrow title. And title insurance and escrow are built in. Staging is another cost that might appear. Moving expenses we don't put in because moving expenses are typically not a closing cost. It's a post-closing cost, but it would not. We're looking for things that may or may show up on the closing statement. Staging usually doesn't, because stagers don't trust agents and sellers. Now, I would leave it in. I would leave it. And the reason they don't trust is they want to be paid up front. And then, but I would throw it in because it would give the seller an estimate as to what they're going to net. Right.
Okay. And these are added to the closing costs. You also you can subtract costs to the seller too.
Right. I can't
from the seller.
It is very rare that the buyer pays a seller cost. But I guess theoretically it's possible there's a fee.
There, yeah.
Right.
So you just click done and it will calculate these, it'll add it in.
Right.
And there you go. See, it says stored under miscellaneous. So that's all there. And there'll be a time in a bit, maybe right now, actually. Is there anything else we need to cover? I think that's about it. If you compute, it's going to give you a little preview here. You can also change the closing date if it always puts it about 30 days out. So if you need to adjust that, click the calendar and just click the date.
The closing date's important.
It is. Yes.
It affects a lot of these numbers. All right. So, and by the way, on the YouTube channel, I have done a couple of times a session on net sheets with Melissa, who's the escrow officer that does all the hard work, right? On this sort of thing. So at this point, whether or not you do it detailed or not. Okay? So the detailed says how much your commission is. Right. And sometimes agents, we like to talk in percentages because the percentages are small, right? 2.5%, right? 3%, small. But the numbers may not be that small. So broker fee is $13,800. Right.
Yep. And if you need to make an adjustment, something's not right, last minute adjustment before you actually produce the net sheet, you can do that. Click edit and go down and make those adjustments. You can even add some stuff in.
Right.
Okay, just let's assume we're good to go, and moving forward, you go, if you want to put out the net sheet, it's the share or print PDF button down here in the bottom right.
Can they store the contact information of a potential client in here?
Yes, they do, and you always have that ability to save the estimate. It will go to this tab here, and there's like a little library of all your past estimates so that you can go back to it at any time.
My suggestion is because I like to use a big screen and a keyboard, do this before you go, save it, and then on your phone, be sure you're logged in, because sometimes you get logged out. And then when you're interacting with the seller, you can pull it up. Because I've had sellers say, well, what about this? And what about that? Oh, I got a second loan. Yeah, I have another loan. Yeah, I owe the IRS. Oh, I've got to do. And so then it's easier to make adjustments because most of it is already done.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I were going on a listing appointment, I would print this out. If you're nervous, you might print out, because you don't know what the price is likely to be, of several of them, right? Looking at different price points, because you may not know until you get there and talk to them.
One thing I want to mention is this does come with a premium service, and what that premium gets you is full personalization. So, for like $1 a month, you're getting full personalization. You can put your photo here. I don't have it here because I do a lot of net sheets for people. I share them. I wouldn't think that they'd want my face on there. So I do as less as possible on my personalization. I even go over to this one. You have different options on templates. So if you don't want all the colors, all the charts, and you just want it black and white, straightforward, you choose that one. If you can scroll down, they give you, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different templates. So you can pick and choose what you like. I typically do this one so I can keep my name out of the whole situation. This is the one that shares my info the least. So I always pick this black and white one. If you were to ever request one from me, I'll export this and I'll email it over. I'm happy to do that at any time. If you're kind of on the road and you need to put something together real quick before a listing appointment, I do that all the time. And sometimes people send me different price points, different commissions. So I've sent out 6 net sheets before on the same for the same listing appointment. Happy to do it. Just send me a text or email, and I can put that together really quick. So this is what it looks like. You can fill in the seller name, customize. You can put that in if you know it. Quick property profile will find that, or you obviously would know what the name is. But from here, you can download it, print it, or just save it for later. Email it to yourself. All these options right here. I usually just download and then click the download PDF. And just like that, it's real quick. You got a seller net sheet for your listing appointment.
So the premium version of this is 99 cents a month.
Highly recommend. It not only gives you personalization, but it gives you a lot of content too that they always keep up to date.
So if I were showing you my screen, some of you have seen it, my picture is there because I've invested the 99 cents a month. And you also get access to like the closing the seller concession cheat sheet, premium. The social media marketing is a premium. Anyhow, any questions about this part so far? Why don't you, since they're thinking of questions, click on calculators for a second. There's a lot of them. All right, you'll notice there's a concession cheat sheet, a buy down calculator, rent versus buy, multiple offers,
Mhm.
which is, what if you get multiple offers, how to look at the net, depending upon which program you're using to accept offers, they will give you a table like Disclosures IO, and I believe Glide will give you a table where it summarizes it, but it doesn't necessarily do nets, which this would do. Cal HFA, nobody ever gets a Cal FHA loan anyhow, but you can see that these are a lot of other calculators that you could have, access to.
And you can even put in, a certain price point and it'll calculate our title and escrow fees if you're just interested in what we charge. This is a good one too.
EXP has provided among the seller's toolkit net sheets that are in a Excel or Google Sheet format, including one that has multiple price points.
Mhm.
The part that you have to come up with is how much would escrow be? What would title be? What's the home warranty? What all of those numbers? What would be the county transfer tax? What would be the city transfer tax? I only use this program because I don't want to, it's just too much work to come up with all those other numbers. All right. So why don't we look at the concession cheat sheet?
Okay.
Now, as I was discussing, I guess it was yesterday morning and maybe a little bit before, when I was talking to Jody when we were doing this, this doesn't come up a lot because in California, the range for seller concessions to what's called interested third parties ranges from 6% on an FHA loan up to 9% on certain kinds of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans, which is the maximum amount that a seller can give as a buyer concession within Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA rules. Now, FHA, I mean, all of them, FHA, VA, Freddie, and Fannie, have all said that if the seller is giving a concession to a buyer for the buyer's agent commission, and the amount is normal, typical, reasonable, customary, that they're not going to include that inside of these concession limits. So for example, if you put in 450,000 just for fun, and let's say 10% down is fine, it doesn't necessarily matter. Usually it's the people with smaller down payments. And if you put in, let's say, we rarely in California hit this maximum, but why don't you put in terms of percentage, put in 4, just for, fun, and then compute. See, I know 4 is under. Now, what it's doing is the concession limit is 6 to 9, depending upon the loan price. And notice what it's done is it's automatically calculated those concessions. If the concession that is given to the buyer to compensate their agent is specified in the residential purchase agreement, then lenders will typically include that as part of this concession limit. So what that would mean is that if the seller was normally giving 4 and you want the buyer's agent to get 2.5, now the concession is 6.5, which is still probably okay, depending on whether or not it's an FHA loan, or it wouldn't be okay on an FHA loan. If the concession that is paid by the seller to the buyer for the buyer's agent compensation isn't written on the residential purchase agreement, but is instead written on another contract, then the lenders don't include that as part of the concession limit. And EXP has such a form, which is the seller direct payment form, where the seller could say, yeah, I'm willing to give you 2.5%. I'm signing right now. There it is. And then we don't have to go through building it into the purchase agreement. If it's built into the purchase agreement, it's part of the 6 to 9% limits. But we rarely reach those limits anyhow. But just so you understand how this works, right? And what the cheat sheet does is that it'll show you, given the different kinds of loans, like if you go to share or to print, I think it shows the menu.
Yes.
Right.
And real quick, I was sitting in a meeting and they were discussing the same thing. And they said, if you have money, left over, there was a circumstance where there was money left over of the concessions left over, and they said you got to put it somewhere. Like, what were they talking about? Like where?
So there's a clause in the residential purchase agreement that it's entitled seller credits.
Yeah.
And what it says is, and I see this where I see the buyer saying, I want a credit of X amount or Y amount. It oftentimes has happened regarding a buyer's agent's compensation.
Okay.
So the buyer's agent is the brother-in-law, brother, father, son, whatever of the buyer. It's not always a familial relationship, but many times. And so the buyer's agent says, I'm going to give you a credit of half of my commission, right? So that you can use it. Now, depending upon what county you're in, the buyer has different closing costs. So for example, in Santa Clara County is a seller pay county, which means the seller typically pays the title and escrow. And what that would mean is that the buyer doesn't have half of the commission worth of closing costs. They just don't have it, right? So let's say the agent or the seller, right, because this is still considered coming from the seller. Let's say that it's because the seller was paying the commission. Let's say the total closing costs that are being credited to the buyer is $30,000, but the buyer only has $20,000 in actual closing costs. Now you can understand from the buyer's perspective, they think they're being cheated out of $10,000 because it said the seller was going to give the buyer a credit of 30, and now the seller is giving the buyer a credit of 20. You're cheating me.
Yeah.
Now, what the clause in the residential purchase agreement says is that if the amount of the credit exceeds the amount that the lender will allow, you don't get it. You don't get it someplace else. You don't get it somehow else. You just don't get it, right? It goes away. So one of my suggestion always is, when agents are asking me about this, call your loan agent up and ask them, how much of a credit can your buyer actually use? Because if it exceeds that amount, they're going to lose it. Now, they could use it. Well, what could they use it for? Essentially, non-recurring closing costs. Title, escrow, but not usually recurring costs, like a reserve for taxes and interest, and right, those are like recurring nightmares, right? It's a recurring cost, but the non-recurring costs are what you can use it for. Now, a buy down, which is a percentage of the loan amount used to lower the buyer's interest rate, is a non-recurring closing cost, and the credit could be used for that. But here's the kicker: it can't be used for down payment. This isn't our rule. It's not an escrow rule. Escrow doesn't care, right? We don't care. It's the lender who cares. And so the lenders have rules as to what a buyer can do with a credit and how much of a credit a buyer can actually use in any transaction. So when you're negotiating credits from the buyer side, you want to be talking to your loan agent about what you're doing. Because asking for more than they have isn't going, they're just going to be unhappy. They're going to ask you to, Venmo them the money or Zelle them your money. I mean, they're going to want you to bring them a red envelope with money in it afterwards because they want that other $10,000 that they were promised, right? Now, that's an actual clause in the residential purchase agreement that explains lender limits on buyer credit.
Thank you. That was well explained. I needed that.
Yeah. Anybody else have questions about that? This is why it's a good reason to talk to me when you're crafting offers and asking for things like that. Because I've seen sellers don't know what the rule is. I've seen sellers and listing agents say, sure, we'll give you $20,000 credit. Yeah. And then the buyer finds out they only have $15,000 in closing costs. Oh, well, not happy. All right.
Okay.
Again, in California, we rarely push the seller concession limit. 6 to 9% is high. I'm just sharing that with you. But it's unresponsive.
Is it normally 3%, Michael?
There is no normal, but 3% is a common percentage that lenders allow. Lenders have different gift percentages. They have different percentages for seller concessions. Usually what we're doing with the seller concession is two things up until till today. All right. So there are three things that going forward, the seller concession is going to be used for. Number one is repairs. All right. You don't have a termite inspection. You get a termite inspection and there's $12,000 of Section 1 work and the buyer wants a credit for $12,000. Number two would be an interest rate buy down. Right, where they pay points and those points lowers the interest rate. But that's limited. You can't do 5 or that sort of thing. And number three would be a concession for compensation of the buyer's agent. So that could be in and of itself 2.5 or 3. And if you're throwing in some, repairs, but you understand it would have to be a lot to get to 6. Right, it would have to be a lot to get to 6, and 9 is like off the charts. Right, I've never seen anything close to that. All right. So what the cheat sheet does, and if you click on, like, let's say the second one, right, and by the way, if you Google search it, I made a slide that has this. But I decided not to put it into the listing presentation. I'm making a longer version of the listing presentation, and I might be including something like this. But depending on whether or not it's owner occupied or an investor property, you can see conventional, and notice in conventional, depending on the down payment, it limits, you see it goes from 3% if it's less than 10% down to 9% if it's more than 25% down. All right, but again, we're rarely pushing this, so whatever. It shows conventional investment means non-owner occupied. It's a set amount. FHA is a set amount. VA doesn't apply because VA is usually a no money down, there's funding fees. In U.S. Department of Agriculture, I haven't seen one of those in a really long. But I have a slide that explains this. Google, if you search it, ChatGPT, Gemini.
There's some good YouTube videos too that I've been watching.
This is not a secret thing.
Yeah.
But we rarely come up against the maximum. And again, talk to your loan agent. Right, because the loan agent also has software and they can tell you this is how much the client can use. And try not to get them more than that, because they'll be mad if they don't get to use all of it. All right. Let's do a buyer one if we could.
Okay.
Now, again, this is, if I were going on a listing appointment for that property on Bottle Hill Road, right? Why don't we see if we still have that in there? 450 Bottle Hill. Let's try and start with Bottle. There we go. And let's say it's got a conventional, that's not as important. The price was 450.
The tax is the same.
Yeah.
450.
And then today's interest rate, that's probably not too far off. 30-year fixed rate loan. Hazard insurance is, I haven't ever checked the math, but that looks like a factor that's been around a while. I'm not going to argue with it because you know more. If there's a HOA, we would be putting in the HOA fee. Now, whether or not the other fees that a buyer might have are almost all loan related. But let's just see what happens. Where is the loan amount?
Loan amount is up here.
Okay, so I see down payment is 10%. That's okay. All right, so let's just see what happens. The city transfer tax is something that a buyer may be paying. There may be, HOA might have monthly dues. Why don't we put in 300 and
Right.
for HOA?
HOA.
Right, monthly, 300 or 250 is fine, whatever. That's something you would be able to determine through the MLS. Closing date is probably not today, but let's make it 1 month out. Generally don't pick a Friday or Monday, but it's fine for these purposes. And then let's hit compute. Okay. So I would do the principal and interest is 25.26. I've had some sellers just be shocked because they have no idea what it currently looks like. Insurance at 131 a month, that could be accurate. PMI, HOA dues, look at a detailed. So they're going to need $56,375 as the day escrow closes. These are their fees. Can everybody see why it might be valuable to show a seller what a typical buyer is going to have to pay? And I would go ahead and pick one of the, one of the pre-formatted ones, especially the ones that show how much you have to show up with. This one doesn't really. 11,374 is closing costs, but doesn't include down payment.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Right.
Let's close this.
Okay.
Just pick one of the formatted ones.
Okay.
All right. And I would pick, yeah, that's fine. See, I want the seller to know that the buyer is going to need almost 60 grand to close this. They're paying $34.87 a month, right? And that they are maybe not in a good position to pay a $15,000 real estate agent commission, right? Because they're already getting in on a shoehorn, all right, being wedged into the house. I believe that we're going to need to have this discussion with sellers just to let them know that the buyer has their own expenses.
Yep.
Yeah.
another cool thing that they do offer is local guides. I think we're pretty much we're wrapped up there.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
so that's something I would take to show the seller, but I like the local guides. I think I
Yes.
showed you guys this last week for a bit. There's, in the premium, there's a variety of templates. There's a colorful one. Some of them, depending on which ones, they have different things. You would have to figure out what your buyer's interested in. I've had buyers say, "Where's Starbucks?"
Yeah.
I want to know. I had, this was a couple that worked at Google, who one of their criteria was that wherever I sold them a house had to be walking distance to Pete's Coffee.
Mhm.
They were from Google, and of course they had the money to do that. And when I showed them the house and they said, "This is great, we love it. Where's Pete's?" That's what they said. I said, "Why don't we walk over and go through the contract?" And they had a big grin and they went and bought the house. So some of this people care about, you know.
Well, yeah, like the walk score, the sound score, all of that's important,
Internet speed,
Yeah.
assuming
You
that
don't have to go to schools.org. You can, it pulls some top, the 3 closest schools in the area, gives you the distance and a grade. It's really nice little piece that we have.
you're going to find that RPR has reports for buyers, which include school reports as well. But this, how hard was this? You find a house. If you're showing a house, I would go ahead and run one of these as
I
well.
always send these out. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Find out where they drink coffee. Remember school? Maybe you don't remember School Scout. That was a program that was Kimberly Leal and some other agent had created, where you could search based on schools,
Okay.
school rankings. My idea, although I couldn't find a programmer to help me, was to create a software called Coffee Scout, where you could search for listings based on their proximity to your favorite coffee shop. But people didn't think I was serious, so I don't know why. But
love
anyhow,
their coffee. Yeah.
all right.
And here, let me before we wrap
Yeah.
things up, I want to show you the premium content. This is the other side of things that you get when you pay that $12 a year annual. I think if you do the annual, it's like a few dollars less. So it's actually less than $12 a year. And they always come out with every month they come out with a different marketing package. So you're never going to be without new content.
By the way, the one that says buyer's agent, 91%, right in the middle there, standard infographics, second one from the left, third one from the left. I've actually, that one and the one to the left of it, right? The one that's teal with the circle right there. Those two, I've actually found myself copying from other real estate agents' social media. And then I realized I already had it. And they had personalized it because they had a premium account. So, which I actually do too. But this, by the way, looked like a nice little infographic.
Yeah, that's what it does. We're not reinventing the wheel here. It's all information you have. It just makes it look pretty, and you can share that on social media.
And then the one next to it is a summary of what was a study done by Bright MLS, the one to the right that says the big 3.
Oh, yeah.
That one. And by the way, I have a copy of the original study. Of course I do. But that doesn't look like it. But that one there. And what it is it has to do with the 3 misconceptions about buyer's agents, which I've seen agents posting this. And if you were wondering, where did they get that cool infographic? It's, Chicago. Well, it could be Fidelity. It could be a lot of time.
Yeah. And it, you can just copy paste this kind of stuff. It gives you all the nice hashtags. So it's all there for you.
And Yeah.
You know, it's great because that's a big question that comes up when I'm working with people is, you know, like I'd like a good social media presence, but I never know what to post. I have they have stuff for about a few months and then they run out of ideas. Well, with this, you never run out of ideas. It's right there for you. So I'd highly recommend.
99 cents a month.
Yeah.
A special just today. All right. Okay, any questions about this? Are you all happy? You need to be able to estimate for sellers what they're likely to net and estimate for buyers what it's likely to cost. As Jody pointed out, most loan agents don't have good cost software at the beginning of a transaction, which may seem counterintuitive because most of the costs, a lot of the costs are loan costs. But the way the loan agent software is configured, they actually have to have you as a buyer and a borrower in their system in order to run the cost estimate. In other words, your client would have to have written an offer on a property that was, I mean, they'd have to be that far along in order for them to start to give you a cost estimate. But at the beginning, the lenders usually don't run these things because their software isn't designed. And even as you heard, Jody from Rocket Mortgage actually uses Chicago Agent One to run cost analysis up front. So when you're meeting with a buyer, it wouldn't hurt that you are able to do this. And I just want to say I had a buyer appointment yesterday with another agent. I mean, not me, but you understand what I'm saying. And my suggestion, because the buyer said, I don't think that the agent is on the line today, but what the buyer said while I was chatting with them was they'd recently moved here and started their job 2 weeks ago in California. This could be a problem, right? Because I said, well, was what you were doing in Minnesota or whatever the same thing you're doing here? And he said, no, not really. Well, lenders usually want 2 years of employment experience within the same industry, not 2 weeks. So there's a chance that, he's not going to be able to get a loan. So my suggestion would be that you would want a prospective buyer to talk to a loan agent, maybe before you spend an hour of your time, in my time, maybe, explaining to them how we're going to help them buy a house. Because it may turn out they're unemployed, bankrupt, and a convicted arsonist. Right, and they're not going to be able to buy a house. And we don't really know what price range until the loan agent tells us. Because they sometimes say, well, I think I can afford 900, and the loan agent says, there's just no way, right? So it's always good to have them talk to a loan agent first, just to make sure they're qualified and can be pre-approved for a reasonable number. And then we also know what to work with because we now know, is it an 80% loan? Is it a 90% loan? Are they doing FHA 3.5% down? You understand, knowing that would have a big effect on how we would run these numbers. Are we cool, everyone?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, that's what I want.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Everybody have a great day. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I always appreciate the opportunity. I do have a new thing I can show for maybe, if you need a little filler. Active Farm. I'd like to show people that and how.
I'm going to be starting a series on getting listed.
Okay. This is a great tool for that. Yes.
Right. I've got it.
Okay.
So next week we're going to start on listings.
Okay.
I know you've got stuff
Mhm.
for that. And so the answer, let's do farming. I don't know. We could even do it next week, Tuesday or Thursday.
Okay.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. It's nice. It's seamless with the Walking Farm app too. So,
Yeah.
so pull
I
into
got,
it.
I have it on my, I have it. Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
Sounds
Cool.
good.
All right, look forward to it. Thanks, Mike.
Bye.
See ya.